So I went to the Houses of Parliament, and this is how it went. Hi, my name's James, and I'm a married dad of 3 living and dealing with motor neuron disease. A few months ago, I was contacted by the All Party Parliamentary Group, who work alongside charities such as the Motor Neurone Disease Association, and they work almost like the middleman between the government and the charities, I believe. If I've got that wrong, correct me in the comments below, but that's pretty much how I understand it. Anyway, they reached out to me and asked if I would like to join them in a meeting at Westminster in the Houses of Parliament, where they've asked me to share my journey and story living and dealing with motor neuron disease. I asked what the meeting was about, and it was all around treatment, or the lack of treatment, for people living and dealing with this condition. Now, believe it or not, there is only one drug available currently to help with motor neuron disease, and that's called riluzole. Riluzole has been around for about 25, dare I say, 28, 30 years, and still today is the only drug that is prescribed for motor neuron disease here in the UK. There is one drug that has been produced recently, which I'll explain a bit more detail shortly. But I was asked to write about a 10 to 15 minute piece to say in the meeting, and 10 to 15 minutes is a long old time to speak. So I put pen to paper and started writing what I think would have been something tangible to say in the meeting that would give the biggest impact for people like MPs and people within the All Party Parliamentary Group to take away with them, to hopefully make some sort of difference, to put pressure on whoever they need to put pressure on to get treatment available for people like myself living with motor neuron disease. So the day come to go to London. I live down on the south coast of England in Dorset, so it was about a 2-hour train drive to London. I was able to take a carer with me. Now, my obvious choice was going to be my wife, but she had to stay home and look after my 3 children. So I took my mother-in-law, who has more experience of London than I do, as if I went on my own, I A, would have got lost, and B, would have needed some assistance as my progression has progressed and needed help with things like getting my coat on, things like that. So I was very grateful of my mother-in-law's help and company while we were on the trip, and I think she was secretly excited to go as well. So we made our way to London, and we arrived at about 11 o'clock, maybe half 11, which gave us enough time to try and find something to eat, which was harder than actually the whole day itself, because finding somewhere to eat near the Houses of Parliament, there isn't really much choice. You have to go a bit further afield and maybe get a tube to some other locations within London, because there wasn't really much of a choice. But we were tight for time, and we found somewhere to eat and then made our way to the Houses of Parliament. Now, in my head, I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to be going through the big pearly gates of the Houses of Parliament that you see on TV and speaking in the same place that the Prime Minister normally speaks in. I think it's called the House of Lords or the House of Commons, something like that. So when I got to the entrance to the Houses of Parliament and said, I'm here for a meeting with the All Party Parliamentary Group, they were like, oh no, you're in the building across the road. I was quietly relieved, because it meant that I was slightly less nervous knowing that I wasn't going to be in the big, massive building. So we made our way to where we were told to go, and we were greeted by almost like airport security to put our bags through x-ray machines, and all the people that were there had machine guns, things like that. So it was quite a full-on security, but quite relaxed at the same time. And once we got through it, we then waited for the people that I was in contact with within the All Party Parliamentary Group, who then escorted us to what was like a really nice conference room with like an oval round table, where I sat down and waited for the meeting to start. Now, the meeting was due to start about 2 o'clock, and from the time I got there, the room quickly filled up with, I would say, almost 30 different people, from MPs to people from the All Party Parliamentary Group and the Motor Neurone Disease Association. So we had a fully packed room. I had my mother-in-law sat in the corner waiting excitingly with her phone to film when it was my turn to speak. And the meeting began with the main MP setting the agenda, introducing people, and then it was my time to shine. So here is what my mother-in-law managed to record, and this is what I said in the meeting. This meeting, it's an honour to share my story with you. I'd first like to offer you a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to join a club. The benefits of this club is it's free to join, there's no monthly subscription, and you meet some amazing and inspirational people along the way. There are some caveats to this club, however. You cannot leave the club once a member, but don't worry, the membership normally expires in around 2 to 5 years for most. You'll end up not being able to work and earn money to provide for yourself and family. You'll also need to rely on others to help maintain being a member of this club, and over time, for some very quick and for some very slow, lose the ability to do simple day-to-day tasks and activities. Being a member of this club, you will find your muscles and strength is affected, and every day you will become weaker and weaker to the point you cannot do anything for yourself. And to top it off, you will have no medical treatment to help. Sounds great, right? So let me ask you this. Does that sound like a club you would like to be a member of? Well, for around 6,000 plus people per year in the UK, unfortunately don't have that option. Hi, my name is James. I'm married with 3 young children under the age of 8, and unfortunately I am a member of such a club since June 2021. I'd like to take you back around to 2020, just before, dare I say it, lockdown. I was a keen runner, completing around 30 miles each week. Rain or shine, I was out running and I was hooked. I completed numerous running events, from London Landmarks Marathon, just here, Bournemouth Half Marathon, 10k races, and I ironically raised money for the Motor Neurone Disease Association along the way. On one occasion after a run, I noticed a consistent twitching in my left arm. Showing my wife, she thought it was weird, but we just put it down to a normal twitch from either exercise or fatigue, a bit like you get an eye twitch when you're tired or maybe had too much to drink. Fast forward a few months, still running regularly, working full time, going on holidays and trying to live the best life I can. The twitching was still very consistent and I started to notice weakness in the arm. It was time to see a doctor, and having seen my local GP, they referred me straight on to the hospital where I saw a neurologist. So for the next part of the story, let's call that neurologist Dr. 1. He examined me and made an appointment for me to get an MRI scan and an EMG test to see what the results were. The MRI was done, which was fine. The EMG test, which was horrible, they actually stuck thick needles into my hands and arms and all over my body, and it was a very uncomfortable feeling, but nonetheless it needed to be done. I then had to wait for these results, and then did the stupid thing and Googled my symptoms. To make the situation even more stressful, my nan unfortunately lost her life to MND, and the results from Google, all showing what I didn't want to see, I could only think the worst. With my anticipation for the test results looming, my mind full with worry and horror, I finally got my follow-up appointment with Dr. 1. At the appointment, I tentatively waited for the doctor to tell me my results, and he said the MRI came back fine, and the EMG test came back inconclusive, which wasn't the best news, but overall wasn't bad news either, and it was a little bit of a relief. Dr. 1 advised to give it about 3 months, and I will then see him again, and then lockdown happened. The day after the appointment, COVID struck the world, and we were all in lockdown, and this uncertainty hanging over me. Around 6 months later, and lockdown restrictions slightly lifted, I was still experiencing arm twitching and weakness. What I noticed in my arm was twitching was now in my other arm. Not hearing from Dr. 1, 3 months later, like he said, I thought best to call him and explain that the new twitching I was experiencing now in my right arm. So while on the phone, he referred me straight away to get another EMG test. This one was even more horrendous and more invasive than the first, hitting every nerve in the process. Yet again, I waited for the results. What felt like a year with all that was going on in the world, At the time, I finally got an appointment letter to see Dr. 1 again with my second lot of EMG tests. However, he wanted to see me on Christmas Eve that year. Not wanting to know the results, nor able to make the appointment being at Christmas Eve, I rescheduled for January, the month after, which I am so glad I did. So the day I would rather forget came. With lockdown restrictions still in place, I was nervous as anything. I had to attend the appointment on my own, not having my wife or any of my family by my side. It was really daunting. Dr. 1 examined me again, mentioned he could see that I had weakness more than the last time. He saw me and proceeded to tell me my second lot of EMG tests gave him enough information to tell me the news that I didn't want to hear. Unfortunately, I believe you have motor neurone disease. In a state of shock, the Dr. 1, bedside manner being very questionable, he went on to say, "We try not to beat around the bush here and just tell you straight." So still in shock, I was then told he would refer me to the main neurologist in the department at Paul Hospital where I'm based, and he specialises in MND for a second opinion. But he then added he was confident enough that I was diagnosed with motor neurone disease. So on my own, and not knowing how to feel or react to what I had just been told and experienced while walking out of the hospital, I held back my emotions, as most men do, and some women maybe. Got into my car and just burst into tears, knowing I had to tell my wife the news, not knowing how it would affect her, especially being pregnant with our third child at the time. After taking the longest drive home, I went straight upstairs so my children didn't see me upset. I just fell apart in front of my wife for the first time since we've been together in just under 20 years. With emotions now all over the place and not knowing if I was actually diagnosed with a death sentence after Dr. 1 wanting to refer me for a second opinion, my family and I now had to wait for the appointment to see the MND specialist at hospital. We were now in another lockdown, as was the rest of the world, so I had to just get on with life, and I was told I wouldn't be able to see the specialist for up to 12 months, which would have brought me up to almost a whole year since my first consultation with Dr. 1. I tried many occasions to find out when my appointment would be to see, let's call him now Dr. 2, for argument's sake, as the uncertainty living with what the first doctor told me was almost too much to live with, but no luck. My family and friends supported me and offered to pay to see private doctors to undergo more tests and the second opinion. Even they had a waiting list, so it made sense just to be patient and wait. On top of all this, my wife was around 20 weeks pregnant at the time with our third child. Luckily, the excitement of baby number 3 and entertaining my other 2 children in lockdown kept me busy and my mind from wandering back into the dark hole about an official diagnosis of motor neurone disease. Roll on about 3 months, and after weekly calls and emails to try and get my appointment to see Dr. 2, the letter finally came to see him. Luckily, I was able to take my wife to this appointment. This was it, eagerly waiting, sweating, fidgeting, probably like I am now, and waiting in the waiting area. My name was called. He weighed me and confirmed that the daily drinking I was partaking throughout lockdown showed that on the scales. With nothing yet said from Dr. 2, me and my wife were escorted into his room where I met 4 other people, from occupational therapists to physiotherapists. I already knew at this time it was not going to be good news. I had to be examined, showed off my now atrophied shoulder muscles, and then sat back down with my wife. Dr. 2 confirmed he also thought it was motor neurone disease and explained I have a very, very slow progressive version. However, uncertainty loomed again, and I was then offered an appointment to see the Professor of Neurology at Oxford University Hospital and was advised to take the appointment to get a third opinion. So at that point, I was still not diagnosed with motor neurone disease. While at this appointment, Dr. 2 offered me a genetic test to see if I had 2 of the most common forms of MND, called CO9-ORF, I believe it's pronounced, and SOD1. This would also show if I could pass it on to my children. Another 2 months later, these results came back Luckily negative, so yet again I waited for another appointment to see the professor at Oxford University. As everything seemed to come in threes, 3 months later I received the appointment, so off we go for the appointment 3 weeks later, and it was 3 weeks until my wife was due with baby number 3. That made no sense, but I hope you got this. Feeling more fed up and anxious, we arrived at the appointment to see the professor, yet more examinations, but within 10 minutes my diagnosis was official. I have motor neuron disease. I turned to my wife to see her in floods of tears. I felt hopeless, but oddly relieved. After all this time, I finally knew what I had. I needed to ask the how long have I got question. He said, if I have a bucket list, I should fulfill anything on that list before I was 40. I was 36 at the time. It was hard to comprehend, and I'm 40 in December this year. However, I was yet again reassured that my version of MND was slow progressing, which is not the norm in most cases. The professor also was confident enough to say that he feels that I'm looking at least 10 years, if not decades, and in this time hopefully receive treatment to help either slow my progression or, dare I say, even find a cure for it. Because of my family history with motor neuron disease, the professor offered me a full genetic panel test which tested me for 30 plus genetic mutations. They would show other forms and help to know if mine was either sporadic or hereditary. 6 months later, and a lot of chasing, my results come back negative for all 30. So I had been diagnosed with a sporadic form of motor neuron disease, as 98% of the patients with this disease do. Great news for my children, as it shouldn't be passed down to them, but it's not so good for me, as like I said, 90% of the population have sporadic MND, and I officially joined the club that no one intends to join. This nicely brings me on to treatments available and what I have been offered since being diagnosed. On the day of my diagnosis, I was given a prescription for a drug called Riluzole, which, to my knowledge, is still the only treatment available for anyone with motor neuron disease in the UK in the last 25, may I say, more years. Apart from the latest drug that was trialled for people carrying the SOD1 gene, after around 9 to 12 months on Riluzole, I consulted my neurologist as I was experiencing really unpleasant side effects from the drug and was advised to stop taking it. So I'm currently on no treatment, unless you include red wine. And a lot of it. On the day of my diagnosis, the professor at Oxford University mentioned about trials, and that I'd be an advocate for drug trials, and they would be banging down my door to get me on them. 2 years later, after my diagnosis, I never heard a thing, and I had to chase the one and only trial that was mentioned to me, called the SMART trial. But I had to almost fight with my neurologist to get me onto this trial, as up until that point it was only available in a certain amount of areas in the UK, and my neurologist had to fight hard to bring that down to Hull Hospital, where I'm located. Luckily this had been done, and I was now on the trial after being examined and made sure I was eligible for it. And after 2 years, I finally felt like I was making progress in finding some sort of treatment to help the MND community find a drug that could potentially help. But unfortunately, after only 6 months on the trial, they pulled 2 of the 3 drugs that I was partaking in, which one of those I was on the trial and they ended it. On the hunt for more drug trials, it seems that many of the applicants need to be in their first 2 years of symptoms, which automatically makes me ineligible for pretty much any that I've seen. As you can imagine, this is very stressful and frustrating, as all I want, as well as many others in the MND community, is the hope that there is something to help our condition, whether that's slowing it down or, best case scenario, curing this awful, awful disease. Treatment is the only hope I have living with this disease. So when I heard at the beginning of December 2022, the most exciting news about a drug called interleukin-2 was trialled, showing very promising results, especially for those with moderate to low progression of the disease like myself, I was extremely interested to know more. The participants appeared to have experienced up to a 70% improvement on life expectancy over the 21-month period of the trial. So as you can imagine, I felt extremely excited and hopeful that there was a treatment finally on the horizon. Now I know interleukin may not be a cure, and I'm aware that the results published are only top line data, and it still needs to be confirmed. However, a glimmer of light had appeared, and that's all that I want, along with the MND community, and what we're so desperate for. Unfortunately, around 15 months on, these results still have not been published to my knowledge. I believe until this happens, it cannot progress any further. As you're probably aware, every day 6 people are diagnosed with MND, and around 6 people die from the disease. So since getting filled with excitement and anticipation from the trial results on interleukin-2, unfortunately, and believe it or not, 2,700 people approximately have died from this disease, losing the chance of being able to extend the time they have with their loved ones. I've heard patients with the financial ability are taking their lives into their own hands and have found that they can purchase the drug Proleukin privately, but at a cost of around £900 to £1,000 per month. This is understandable. Why wait and die when you can buy and survive potentially longer? This is how desperate we all are. But is self-medication the only option to try and gain extra time to live and make memories with my family and my children? At this moment, I believe it is. Nonetheless, there are 2 worrying points about this. After speaking with these patients privately getting Proleukin, there is obviously, it's best performed medically to promote safety. Secondly, our community is beginning to experience a health inequality situation. Those who can afford to pay could live for longer. All this could be solved if the results for the trial were published, and we would all have a fighting chance. Alternatively, the results could be published as ineffective. What a blow that would be. However, I'm a realist, and I would pick myself up, brush myself down, and focus my energy on the next glimmer of hope. And that's all I and the MND community have at this point. Hope for treatment, so we don't have to be a part of a club we never wanted to be a member of. Now, life since my diagnosis is a lot different than before. I can no longer work. I now need my wife to help me do simple things like get dressed, can't tie my shoelaces, or my children's, play football with my 2 boys, dressing up with my little girl. With my hands and arms slowly getting weaker, I struggle to do the simplest of things like eat and drink, brush my teeth. I now can't even use a conventional toilet. I recently had to get what they call a wash-dry Japanese toilet, which is amazing, by the way. I highly recommend one. And it gives me basically some sort of dignity as I progress with this ever-debilitating disease. I even had to spend thousands of pounds to adapt my own home with some help from the council and some help from the MNDA to what I call future-proof it, for if and when I end up in a wheelchair. Apart from that, I try to enjoy what time I have left with my wife and my 3 children, while trying to raise awareness by sharing my journey on the likes of social media such as Instagram, sometimes Twitter and YouTube. I've also created an established Facebook group offering support for MND sufferers and their carers, which we've now hit over 1,000 members. I also do a podcast where I interview the MND community and talk about my journey. And I've also been asked to be on other people's podcasts around different countries like Canada and even America. I feel very fortunate compared to others living with this condition, having a slower progression, which enables me to attend meetings such as this one. But it's not easy some days. I try to stay positive and feel that in itself is the best and only medicine at the moment, while I hope that one day a treatment will be available. This condition holds no prisoners. It only gets worse, and to be honest, myself, along with the MND community, would much prefer treatment to live longer than just putting a band-aid over it. Thank you very much for listening.
So that was a long 15 minutes of speaking with all eyes on me. Every time I was sort of doing my speech, I felt I wanted to look up. And then every time I did, I could just feel people just looking at me, which was really nice because I knew that they were being attentive and they could they were listening to what I was saying, but it was nerve-wracking knowing that everyone was staring at me while I was talking. The response I got when I finished what I was saying was amazing. I got a round of applause, and at the end of the meeting, I even got handshakes, high fives. Some MPs even wanted selfies with me, almost felt like a celebrity, which was really, really nice to receive. Now, part of the meeting was around treatment. So obviously, as you may have heard in what I said, I spoke about something called interleukin-2, which is a drug that is or has been trialled that has shown really good promise and results for people living with this condition. So I'm hoping bringing that up would bring it to the forefront of the MPs' minds to try and push and get whatever the data we're waiting on to actually get this drug available for us to try ourselves to see if it works. Now, what else was brought up in the meeting, which is really unfortunate and really upsetting to hear, is there's actually been a drug that has been produced, which is called torphysin. Now, this is the second drug over riluzole that I mentioned earlier that has been produced in the last 25 plus years to help people with motor neuron disease. Now, it only helps people with a genetic mutation called SOD1, which actually affects 2% of the population here in the UK that are living with motor neuron disease. That equates to about 60 to 100 lives that can be saved from this one drug. Unfortunately, from when it got produced to the trial to showing that it works, it then got disapproved by some people called NICE. Now, they weren't very nice, but it's the last step, from what I believe, before it goes to a drug that is prescribable within the NHS. The reasons behind this, I don't know. I put it down to potentially being all about money. And if I find out more, I'll obviously let you know. If you know more than I do, please feel free to put them down in the comments. But yeah, it's unreal that there's a drug available to help people with motor neuron disease and it's now not available. But apart from that, it was a really, really good day. It was a knackering day, but I got such a great response from what I said, and I'm hoping that it would actually make a difference. That was cemented, actually. By the time I got back, I was then contacted by the Motor Neurone Disease Association, and they asked me if I would do a short write-up of the day attending the meeting with the All Party Parliamentary Group. And they would actually feature that in their quarterly magazine called Thumbprint, which I have here. A copy arrived today. And yeah, my write-up is in the magazine, which I'm really proud of. And my kids, especially my eldest, he now thinks he's famous because he's in the magazine as well. And there it is. So thank you so much for the Motor Neurone Disease Association featuring me in their magazine. And I'd like to thank the All Party Parliamentary Group for the invitation to join them at the meeting. It's something that I really enjoyed, and I would definitely do something like that again. So you know where I am if you feel the need to invite me to things like that again. And that is it for this episode video. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for listening. And I will see you on the next one.